In the silence of old photographs, the ghosts of divided nations still linger. More than a century and a half ago, young men stood beneath the southern sky, their hearts bound by duty, their futures clouded by war. They fought, they endured, and in the fleeting seconds a camera's flash, their faces were captured forever in shades of black and white. But time faded their memory, until now, through the art of restoration and the precision of modern AI, we can finally see them as they once were, in living color. This is not just a story of war, but of humanity. These are the Confederate soldiers, men whose faces tell of courage, loss, and the echoes of a world forever changed. History has not forgotten them. It has simply been waiting to be reborn. Captain George Washington Hammond, Campbell Volunteers, Company 35th Georgia Infantry. Hammond enlisted as a first lieutenant on August 12, 1861 in Campbell County. He suffered absences due to illness and also served on recruiting duty during his enlistment. He resigned his commission in 1863. Hammond died in 1869 and is buried in Fulton County. Lieutenant Colonel William Luffman, 11th Georgia Infantry. Luffman enlisted as a captain of the Murray Rifles, Company C, on July 3, 1861 in Atlanta, and eventually became lieutenant colonel. He was severely wounded in the left leg on May 7, 1864 at the Battle of the Wilderness. He survived as wound in the war, died in 1893, and is buried in Murray County, Georgia. John Wesley Stewart, Panola Rifles, Company H, 13th Georgia Infantry. Stewart enlisted on July 8, 1861 in Griffin, Georgia. Like many soldiers, he suffered absence due to illness during his service, including dysentery, diarrhea, and even sunstroke. He was captured at Farmville, Virginia in April 1865, ending the war for him. Private John William Brown, Meriwether Volunteers, Company B, 13th Georgia Infantry. Brown enlisted on July 8, 1861 in Griffin, Georgia. He was wounded on September 17, 1862 at the Battle of Sharpsburg. He was wounded yet again on May 12, 1864 during the Spotsylvania Campaign. He was sent home to recover, and it appears he never returned to his regiment. Private William G. Beecham, Confederate Guards, Company A, 13th Georgia Infantry. Beecham enlisted on July 8, 1861 in Griffin, Georgia. He suffered absences due to illness, and he was assigned to serve as a teamster for a time. He is said to have deserted on August 3, 1864 near Martinsburg, Virginia. 3rd Corporal William Decatur Mangum, Confederate Guards, Company A, 13th Georgia Infantry. Mangum enlisted on July 8, 1861 in Griffin, Georgia. He was wounded on September 17, 1862 at the Battle of Sharpsburg. Due to the nature of his wound, he was later appointed lieutenant and detailed to round up stragglers back in Georgia, as well as guarding prisoners at Andersonville. 2nd Corporal Charles Absalom Mangum, Confederate Guards, Company A, 13th Georgia Infantry. Mangum enlisted on July 8, 1861 in Griffin, Georgia. He served for an extended period of time as a clerk. He surrendered at Appomattox. Private William Pinckney Irvin, Confederate Guards, Company A, 13th Georgia Infantry. Irvin, from Pike County, enlisted at age 18 in July 1861. He was killed on September 17, 1862 at the Battle of Sharpsburg. 1st Sergeant Richard Willis Milner, Confederate Guards, Company A, 13th Georgia Infantry. Milner enlisted on July 8, 1861, and served as a 1st Corporal, but was soon given a medical discharge. He went home, regained his health, and re-enlisted in May 1862. He was mortally wounded on December 14, 1862 during the Battle of Fredericksburg, Virginia, and died as a result of his wounds on December 16, 1862 at Hamilton's Crossing, Virginia. Sergeant Edward Jason M. Moore, Lee Guard, Company B and Harrison Volunteers. Company G, 51st Georgia Infantry, and Sergeant Andrew Anderson Watson Moore, Lee Guard. Company B, 51st Georgia Infantry. Edward enlisted as a private on March 4th, 1862 in Starkville, Lee County, Georgia, as a private and later became sergeant. Other notes state that he enlisted in Quitman County. He started off in Company B and was transferred to Company G. He was captured on September 14, 1862 at the Battle of South Mountain during the Sharpsburg Campaign, but was soon paroled. In 1863, he was sent to hospital with pneumonia and later died in Georgia. Anderson enlisted as a private on May 14, 1862 in Starkville, Georgia, and was later promoted to sergeant. He was mortally wounded and captured at the Battle of Cedar Creek, Virginia on October 19, 1864. It appears he suffered multiple gunshot wounds, to include a compound fracture of the left thigh. He died as a result of his wounds on November 27, 1864, while being held as a POW in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Private Henry Washington Hemphill, Henry David Equalright, Company K, 52nd Georgia Infantry. Hemphill enlisted on March 4, 1862 in Carnesville, Georgia. He became a POW when Vicksburg capitulated to federal troops in July 1863, but was soon paroled. He was surrendered in Augusta, Georgia in May 1865. Corporal Leander F. Crumley, Cleveland Volunteers, Company B, 52nd Georgia Infantry. Crumley enlisted on March 4, 1862 in Cleveland, Georgia. Like many soldiers placed into large camps, he became sick almost immediately and was so for some time. He died due to disease on March 30, 1863 in White County, Georgia. Private Thomas H. Sparks, field musician, Jackson Guards, Company B, 59th Georgia Infantry. Sparks enlisted on May 8, 1862 in Macon, Georgia. On July 2, 1862, he was appointed regimental drummer. He was wounded at the Battle of Gettysburg and left behind after the retreat, subsequently becoming a POW on July 5, 1863 near Gettysburg. He was paroled, continued to serve, and ended the war at Appomattox. Corporal Thomas C. Turner, Davis Rifles, Company C, 12th Georgia Infantry. Turner enlisted as a private on June 15, 1861 in Macon, Georgia, and was later promoted to corporal. He was sick in 1862 and missed the Battle of Sharpsburg. He was mortally wounded, suffering a gunshot wound to the knee joint on July 12, 1864 at the Battle of Fort Stevens, the Confederate move against Washington, D.C. Subsequently captured, his leg was amputated at the thigh, and he later died on December 26, 1864 in Washington, while being held as a POW. Private Septimus F. Theus, Arthur Grays, Company C, 59th Georgia Infantry. Theus enlisted on May 8, 1862 in Butler, Taylor County, Georgia. He was present until May 13, 1864, when he was mortally wounded, shot through the lungs at the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse, Virginia. He died as a result of his wounds on May 27, 1864 in Richmond, Virginia. Private Richard A. Theus, Arthur Grays, Company C, 59th Georgia Infantry. Theus enlisted on May 8, 1862 in Butler, Taylor County, Georgia. From his records, it appears he served the entire war without any absences and illnesses, which is a remarkable feat in itself. Theus died in 1926 and is buried in Wilbarger County, Texas. Private John Jasper Holland, Pulaski Volunteers, Company G, 8th Georgia Infantry. Holland enlisted in the summer of 1861. He died, probably due to disease, in the General Hospital in Covington, Georgia in August 1864. First Lieutenant John Wesley Culpeper, Eccles Guards, Company D, 8th Georgia Infantry. Culpeper enlisted on May 18, 1861 in Meriwether County as a private, later becoming first lieutenant. Like most soldiers, he suffered some absence due to illness. Culpeper was killed at the Battle of Fussell's Mill, Virginia on August 16, 1864. First Lieutenant John Paulden Duke, Floyd Infantry, Company H, 8th Georgia Infantry. Duke, born in Randolph County, Alabama, enlisted in Rome, Georgia on May 13, 1861 as a corporal and eventually becoming first lieutenant. He suffered a gunshot wound to the left leg on July 2, 1863 at the Battle of Gettysburg, but recovered and returned to his regiment. On March 2nd, 1865, Duke took time to get married to Irene Isabella Oral, herself a Virginian. 1 month later, Duke was captured on April 3rd, 1865, just before the surrender at Appomattox. Duke survived the war, died in 1917, and is buried in Floyd County, Georgia. Private Robert James Franks, Rome Light Guard, Company A, 8th Georgia Infantry. Franks enlisted on July 16, 1861 in Rome, Georgia. He suffered from typhoid fever in 1862. At the Battle of Gettysburg, he took a slight gunshot flesh wound to the thigh, but soon recovered. Franks served until the end and surrendered at Appomattox in 1865. 4th Sergeant Thomas William Clements, Eccles Guards, Company D, 8th Georgia Infantry. Clements enlisted on May 18, 1861 in Merriweather County, Georgia. In 1862 and early in 1863, he was hospitalized for various ailments. He was mortally wounded on July 2, 1863 at the Battle of Gettysburg, suffering wounds to the foot, thigh, and knee. He was captured in Gettysburg on July 4th, left behind with scores of other wounded Confederates. Clements died as a result of his wounds on July 7, 1863, while still in Gettysburg. Private George Washington Watson, Old Company H, 38th Georgia Infantry. Watson, a 20-year-old farmer, enlisted on April 13, 1861 in Old Company H. Aside from absence due to illness, he was present the entire war and surrendered at Appomattox in 1865. Private Joseph R. Adams, Company K and Company L, 5th Georgia Infantry and Company B, 2nd Georgia Sharpshooter Battalion. Adams enlisted in Macon, Georgia on May 11, 1861 in Company K, which later became Company L, with Company L later forming Company B of the 2nd Georgia Sharpshooter Battalion. Adams served until he was wounded at the Battle of Chickamauga, Georgia on September 20, 1863. His last military file lists him as absent wounded in August 1864. Private Philip Whitener, Letcher Guards, Company B, 11th Georgia Infantry. Whitener, born in North Carolina, enlisted on July 3, 1861 in Gilmer County, Georgia in Company B, later serving in Company F. He suffered several wounds on August 28, 1862 during the Battle of Second Manassas, but recovered and returned to his regiment. He was captured on July 5, 1863 in the aftermath of the Battle of Gettysburg. He was exchanged in February 1865. He was killed on February 27, 1865 in Gilmer County, Georgia, by a federal guerrilla band led by a Captain Noblest. This is history reborn in color. Thank you for watching and for remembering the faces that time once left behind.